Chainsaw Man, once again in chapter 104 highlights something that's been an ever-present factor in the story, that being how perception and reality do not always align with one another and how one's own perception can come to alter their own reality and the realities of those around them, doing immense harm. In chapter 104, we see Ace and Denji going back and forth about how Chainsaw Man is portrayed and how he actually is, with Denji being the representation of reality while Ace is the embodiment of perception. Ace's perception of Chainsaw Man has been built up over time by other people's perceptions of him, which are also not based upon the subjective reality. We as the reader know the subjective reality of the situation. We have seen Denji's character, we have seen how he acts independent of our own bias and the influence of others' perception. We have the facts, but Fujimoto is determined to shove home to us that just because we know them, the world Denji is living in doesn't. Once a perception is built up, with enough time and effort it can begin to alter the reality of a situation, transforming it into something entirely different, even to the point that in story, perception is what dictates reality to an extent. And I'm going to use this video to prove that, using various evidences from the manga itself and how Fujimoto is actually layering a veiled message about the dangers of perception overriding reality. The first time this comes into play in any sort of major way is right at the beginning of the story, with the explanation of how devils grow in power. The perception of something as terrifying regardless of its actual threat level or potential for harm, none of that matters in the face of perception of the people. If someone in Chainsaw Man was capable of convincing the world that tomatoes were suddenly one of the most dangerous things in the universe, even if factually everyone who even knew what a tomato was knew that wasn't true, if they were capable of convincing themselves it was, then the world of Chainsaw Man would bend as reality became what the majority viewed it as. This is only the beginning, but remember this is the core power system of the entire manga. You can't separate Chainsaw Man, both the character and the series, from this idea because they are so interconnected. So even if you don't agree with some of my later examples, this is one you simply can't argue with. The next time this becomes a major factor is in the assassination arc, specifically with Santa, the Darkness Devil and Cosmo. Santa believed wholeheartedly that she understood everything. Her perception was that by gaining power from the Darkness Devil she was able to comprehend the universe to its fullest. She was so confident in this fact that she was willing to stare down Cosmo, a being with all knowledge in existence, with the belief that she would be able to deal with it. In this moment, Fujimoto demonstrates once again the dangers of letting our own personal beliefs or perceptions override our understanding of reality. But this time, rather than reality buckling under the strain and being forced to change to conform with what the masses desired, instead this time reality bit back and asserted its own dominance over Santa's perception. The fact that Cosmo, despite being a fiend, and despite being a less powerful devil overall when compared to the likes of the Darkness Devil, could still overwhelm a being empowered by the Darkness Devil with pure knowledge, again helps to hammer home that facts, logic and reality itself are not something that can be so easily brushed aside, and nor should they be. A third time this occurs is during the final portions of Part 1, where Denji is facing off against Makima and her army, severely weakened owing to the shifts in the world's perception of Chainsaw Man. Due to Makima's direct intervention and miscommunication over certain events, Chainsaw Man came to be viewed as a hero. While not an entirely incorrect summary, obviously there is a significant difference between how the world viewed him at that point and the actual facts that we as the reader were aware of. However, because Makima, the controlled devil, was able to change people's perceptions of Chainsaw Man, he became significantly weaker, tying into the fact that devils' strength is determined by the amount of fear someone has about that which they represent. This might be the most overt time Fujimoto comes out and presents the dangers of just allowing your perception to override reality, be it because you heard something from a source you trust, such as perhaps a news network or a friend or some other form of media, allowing yourself to be influenced to change and accept a perception which differs from reality can have disastrous effects. In this case, I think Fujimoto was trying to highlight the fact that, by refusing or simply being ignorant of reality, you can harm those you were seeking to help in the first place. And of course just in the last 2 chapters we had some interesting displays of this major underlining part of the story, what with the news report displaying various perceptions of Chainsaw Man, while Denji himself speaks about his own biased perception of himself as an individual unable to view himself objectively. That's another part of this whole thing I haven't mentioned up until now. But yes, Fujimoto also highlights the dangers of us not looking at ourselves objectively and creating false perceptions of ourselves in order to hide or attempt to rewrite the reality of our lives. Between the back and forth about Chainsaw Man's personal motives and debates, each of them having varying levels of objectivity and subjectivity to them, but none of them would be able to agree with each other on which parts of that whole are true and which are false, creating a disturbingly twisted narrative for the reality of the situation, whereas it should be rather plain and simple from an objective standpoint. And of course, the big blow-up between Ace and Denji in the last chapter puts the nail in the coffin for me. This is a story about the dangers of letting perception cloud your eyes from the truth, and about the danger and conflict being unable to accept and understand reality can bring. Of course, beyond those few major points I mentioned where this feature comes up, there are many smaller moments in the story also, such as the whole Riz situation, or just Makima's entire existence as a character being all about perception versus reality. But I'll be honest, I'm running out of steam writing this and don't have the energy to go writing up about a dozen more pieces of evidence, when I feel like I've got to a pretty decent level of evidence that I'm comfortable leaving it up to you guys to discuss in the comments below about what you think. Did you notice this underlining narrative the whole time? Or are you only starting to notice now with it being a major focus of the second part of the story so far? Let me know in the comments below. But anyway, I've been the Anonymous Weeb and I wish you a good day or night wherever you may be.